Were you arrested for possession of prescription drugs? Was it illegal? Why didn't the police understand what was going on? Is there a way to beat your case? Hi, I'm Jeff Hampton with the Hampton Law Firm. Today I want to welcome you to our YouTube channel and thank you for joining us, but I want to talk to you about something that happens very frequently, and that is someone being arrested and charged with possession of prescription drugs. And listen, there's a lot here that we'll go through, but if you wait around to the end of this video, I'll also give you a free ebook, The Ultimate Guide to Your Drug Defense in Texas. I'll be happy to send that right over to you, and we'll get that to you at the end of the video. Now, let me jump right into this and talk about prescription drugs in Texas. Now, you know, some states out there are a little bit more lenient, understanding that prescription drugs many times are seen differently than maybe the hardcore illegal drugs that are out there. But I want you to understand, we find that happens all the time. Some people will look down on someone charged with the crime of drug possession because people think that their lives are in disarray and they're out of order, and maybe they're a criminal, right? That's how people like to define someone who's facing a drug possession charge. But the reality of it is we have represented many clients, maybe that went through a terrible car accident or had some serious surgeries that they had to deal with that caused them a lot of pain, and they ended up becoming literally, we are in an opioid crisis in the country that we're in today in the United States because of some of these prescription drugs being overprescribed, and as a result of that, people end up having prescription drug addictions that was not any fault of their own, quite frankly. And so the bad news about that is Texas drug laws still look at the possession of prescription medication. They label them based upon the schedule that they're listed under the law, and we'll go over those in just a second. And you could be facing a felony or misdemeanor charge, depending upon the type of drugs that you possessed. Now, let's talk about this for a few minutes. The number one question people ask, and I've kind of already answered it, is it illegal to possess prescription drugs without a prescription? It is, right? It is illegal to possess prescription drugs without a prescription. You must have a valid prescription in your name. So under Texas Controlled Substances Act, it says specifically, it is illegal to intentionally or knowingly exercise care, custody, or control over prescription medication labeled under a penalty group designated under Texas drug laws. In other words, if you are in possession of a prescription medication and you don't have that valid prescription in your name, then the police are going to arrest you for it as an illegal act. Now let's talk for a few minutes. I want us to go through the Texas Health and Safety Code very quickly, just so that I can unpack this for you and have a better understanding of the type of punishment that Texas law designates to different types of drugs, okay? The most common prescription drugs fall into these groups. Almost all of them do. Now, I will tell you, Group 1 carries the most severe penalties, and Group 4 is the least severe. It's the most lenient, okay? So let's look at possession of a controlled substance, penalty Group 1. In this type of prescription drugs, I'm going to give you some examples. You're talking about Oxycontin, hydrocodone, Lorcet, Lortab, Percocet, Vicodin, many of these very strong pain medication type drugs. Those are in that first category for penalty Group 1. Now let me walk you through this. People say, well, how do I know what the punishment range is for that type of drug? It's based on the weight. How much of the drug was possessed? If the possession was for a penalty Group 1 drug was less than 1 gram, it will be designated a state jail felony offense. A state jail felony offense carries a minimum of 180 days in jail, up to 2 years in prison, and up to a $10,000 fine. What if the amount of the drug was a minimum of 1 gram, but less than 4 grams? There you'd be looking at a third-degree felony, punishable by a minimum of 2, up to 10 years in prison, and up to a $10,000 fine. If you then talk about a substance that weighs not less than 4 grams, but less than 200 grams, now you are talking about a second-degree felony, punishable by a minimum of 2 years in prison, up to 20 years in prison, and up to a $10,000 fine. Finally, anything that you're starting to talk about that gets up over that 200 grams, 200 up to 400 grams, There you're looking at a first-degree felony with a minimum of 5 years up to life in prison and up to a $10,000 fine. So, and some people say, well, what if it's less than 400 grams? But now what if I'm over 400 grams? Well, if you're over 400 grams, there you're talking about a higher minimum of literally no less than 10 years up to life in prison. So as you can see, the possession of the drug, the penalty range is dictated by the seriousness, how much it weighs, right? If the heavier, the more of the substance you have, the more severe the penalties. All right, now let's talk about penalty group 2. What about penalty group 2? Here, this includes drugs such as amphetamines, Adderall. Those are the two most common ones, is Adderall and amphetamines. Now here, the penalty groups are exactly the same. The punishment ranges are exactly the same as penalty group 1, except when you get to possession less than 400 grams, if it's 4 to 400 grams, there you're talking about a second-degree felony, okay? So just to back up, I don't want to get confusing here. If it's under a gram, it's a state jail felony. If it's 1 to 4 grams, you'd be looking at a third-degree felony. But then it changes. Now, if it's 4 to 400 grams, it's a second-degree felony punishable by 2 to 20 years and up to a $10,000 fine. And if it is more than 400 grams, under penalty group 2, you would be looking at 5 to life in prison, 5 years minimum to life in prison and up to a $10,000 fine. Now, I'm trying to quickly go through this for you, okay? Now, what about penalty group 3? Let's talk about some of the drugs here. Penalty group 3, you're talking about anabolic steroids, hydrocodone, you're talking about lorazepam, Ritalin, Valium, Xanax, some of these other types of other very popular type drugs that are out there, but yet, they're commonly prescribed is what I'm saying. But here, let's talk about some of these different penalty ranges that we're talking about. If it's a possession of a controlled substance, penalty group 3, and if it's under 28 grams, if it's less than 28 grams, you're talking about a Class A misdemeanor punishable by up to 1 year in the county jail and up to a $4,000 fine. Now, let's talk about what if it is 28 grams up to 200 grams. If you're talking about penalty group 3, 28 to 200 grams, you're now looking at a third-degree felony punishable by a minimum of 2 years up to 10 years in prison and up to a $10,000 fine. Under that same penalty group 3, if the weight is 200 grams up to 400 grams, you're now looking at a second-degree felony, 2 to 20, and up to a $10,000 fine. And if it's more than 400 grams, it's a first-degree felony, okay? So you notice a little bit of deviation there. Under 28 grams, you're looking at a misdemeanor, okay? It's getting a little bit lighter as we move. Then we get to penalty group 4. Penalty group 4 includes types of drugs that have low potential abuse. Drugs like cough syrup with codeine or opium. There is some types of morphine that is included in that as well. Here, you're looking at a Class B misdemeanor for possession of controlled substance weighing less than 28 grams, and that would be looking at a jail sentence of up to 180 days in jail and up to a $2,000 fine. The remaining possession that we talked about, over 28 grams, that will be the same application for punishment as I just read to you from penalty group 3, okay? Just trying to move quickly through this so you'll understand. It's a little confusing when you talk about prescription drugs. Now, here's the other thing, just a layered on top. What if a police officer arrests you for these prescription drugs and you're in a school zone? Well, now here's what they get to do. They get to enhance your penalty range. If normally you would have been charged with a state jail felony, you being found in a school zone with these items enhances that to a third degree. It moves it up one level of punishment just because of where you possessed it, okay? So there are some examples where those penalties can be enhanced. Now, I want to talk to you for a few moments before we round out our video here about some defenses that may be effective in your prescription drug case, okay? The number one defense we're going to talk about is, what if the state of Texas cannot prove possession? Now, under Texas drug laws, the state of Texas must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you intentionally or knowingly exercised care, custody, or control over that prescription drug. So failure to prove the element of possession should result in a dismissal of your charges or a not guilty verdict at trial. Now, what does it mean to possess something? I kind of already gave you the definition of it. The definition of possession in Texas is to exercise care, custody, or control. Literally, care, custody, or control. So obviously, having the drugs in your pocket, having the drugs in your purse would be sufficient evidence for the police to reasonably believe that you have exercised care, custody, or control over that item. Now, what if you don't have physical possession over the drugs? It's a little bit different situation. Can you still be found in possession of those drugs if you don't physically have them? Well, under Texas drug laws, yes. For example, what if there are 3 people? What if you're in a car with 3 other people and drugs are found in that car? How will the police decide who is in possession of those drugs if y'all are all standing around it, right? Now, it's kind of a strange thing, but sometimes police will try to claim it's joint possession, that more than one person can literally possess the same item. What they're looking for, though, is were the drugs within your wingspan? Were they within your reach? Were you in a place where you were able to quickly exercise that control or care or custody over those drugs? And so in that situation, the further your physical body is away from those drugs, the harder it may be for the police to be able to prove that case, okay? So effectively using this defense many times relies upon your criminal defense attorney, your possession lawyer here, to really dig into that and look at it, because that's a big deal. When it's not in your physical control, then they're taking a few leaps here logically to believe you exercise that control when it's away from you, all right? Now, defense number 2. What if you did not have criminal intent? Remember, in addition to proving that you exercised control over that item, they must also prove beyond a reasonable doubt, the prosecutor must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you intentionally or knowingly exercised care, custody, or control over the prescription drugs. Now, listen, what if you had no knowledge of it? What if you were within the wingspan of these drugs? It was there with you, but you had no idea that they were there, and you didn't do anything intentionally or knowingly. For example, we represented a client who was pulled over for a suspicion of DWI, and the police searched her purse and her car, and after searching the car, they found a few pills that turned out to be Xanax. They attempted to question her about those prescription drugs, and she denied any knowledge about the drugs being in her car, and she genuinely didn't know they were there. But yet she was subsequently charged with possession of a controlled substance, penalty group 3. And after interviewing our client, they came in, hired us, we talked to them. We learned that she had been hanging out with a friend of hers who actually had a prescription for that drug and had inadvertently left those pills in her car. She didn't even know that they were there. They had been left there because her friend had brought them with her to take with the water that they had in the car. We were able to meet up with that witness and obtain a sworn affidavit form, a witness affidavit, where that individual admitted, hey, they're mine. Look, here's my prescription. She didn't know anything about it. She had no criminal intent as defined by the law. And so as a result of that, our client did not technically exercise that care, custody, or control because she did not have the criminal intent to do so. All right. This helped us assist with getting her case resolved in a very favorable way for her. Now, that example I just gave you also illustrates the importance of the conversations you have with the police. You know, especially when you've done nothing wrong. Be careful. When a police officer is interrogating you, they are trying to get any information from you that could be used to try to make it appear that you knew something, that you had some type of knowledge or criminal intent to do so. The reason why I tell you to be careful is how can you trust that what you say is being construed properly? How can you trust that their interpretation of what you're saying is accurate? So remember, you do not have to answer those questions, okay? Now, you always have the right to remain silent, is my main point on that. So finally, listen, if you're innocent, especially if you're innocent, if you did not commit this crime, you know, one of the times people tell me, say, well, I forgot my prescription, but they arrested me anyway. Well, definitely, if you've got a copy of your prescription, that's one of the best ways to prove that you didn't do anything wrong, and your attorney needs to get that information to try to get your case dismissed. But maybe you or a loved one, maybe you're in the place right now where you're facing a prescription drug case and you don't know what your next step is. I want to invite you personally, if you have a case in the North Texas area, maybe out of the Fort Worth or Dallas area, don't hesitate to contact the Hampton Law Firm. I'd be happy to give you a free case analysis, a free consultation, walk you through the steps of what needs to be done. And you need to make sure you make good choices to preserve your future, your freedom, and you got to get this off of your record. Now, I promised you if you waited around to the end of this video, I'd give you a free ebook, The Ultimate Guide to Your Drug Defense in Texas. If you'll click the link down here below, I'll be happy to send that over to you. And I want to thank you for joining us here today. I hope you enjoyed what you've heard today. If so, subscribe to our YouTube channel and like this video, and we'll send you more great content just like this. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time.